Welcome. You're listening to the Renegade River Show, and my name is Mike Hewitt. And today my guest is Jim Brown. Jim is a retired Pontiac police detective. He twice served as the vice president and then president of the Pontiac Police Officers Association. Today, him and I will be talking about retired health care benefits of the retired employees of cities such as Pontiac and Detroit, the governor's policy of emergency managers and his Medicaid explosion, and what it all might mean to you. But before we get to all of that, though, I've got a couple notes that I want to comment on this topic in advance. First, just as we get into the show, understand that I'm not promoting a bailout. I'm not promoting unionism or any other such thing. As you know, Republicans control the State House, the State Senate, and the governor's office. In fact, I consider myself a Republican, albeit a conservative, Jeffersonian-leaning Republican. We conservatives believe benefits such as health care, contributions by employers to our 401ks, an employer Social Security co-share contribution, those type of things are in fact our wages. Money's paid on our behalf by our employers as compensation for the work we do. That's money we've earned. With that, today I want to talk more about the commitment and local control. In my life, I've owned businesses that have employed people, and I've managed the business of others. And I have been an employee myself. I've known success and failure. In both circumstances, commitments made to employees came first. To me, that's a basic principle that is not negotiable. I've had to tell employees that we can no longer continue in the current employer-employee relationship as it is. But I would never refuse to pay the wages they've already earned. The wages that go to employees are a trust that comes before all other obligations, in my view. Wages are certainly not to be taken, stolen, or glommed onto. Next, I originally supported the concept of an emergency financial manager to help manage troubled school districts and municipalities. However, watching them in action, wow, folks, an EFM isn't a managing bean counter as I'd originally been led to believe, but rather is just another political operative. And that's something I have to reject out of hand. It's one thing for an employer, including cities, to draw a line in the sand and say from this point going forward, we're going to be doing something different. But it's another thing entirely for a city or a municipality or an employer to say we're not going to pay you those things that we've already agreed to pay you for the work you've already performed. To me, that's unacceptable, it's unethical, and frankly, it's un-American. With that, I want to dive right into the dialogue. Jim, you were involved, as I understand it, with the negotiations that took place in Pontiac back upon a time that surrounds the pension and health care that now seems to be the focus, frankly, both in Pontiac, but that's also happening in Detroit and Saginaw and Flint and Bay City and in Benton Harbor and a number of other cities in Michigan. Is that right?
Mostly you're all right there, Mike. I think a point that we need to make before we even start is this is a system that's been in place well over 40 years. During my course of tenure and others, they were improved on, but the basic system, when I hired on in 1973, was already in place. This isn't a new benefit. That the cities just all of a sudden go, wow, how do we pay for this? They've known over 40 years that in 2013, they're going to have to pay health care benefits for retirees. So it's bad planning on their part, probably. Sign of the times, probably. But still, like you said, they're obligated to pay for these benefits.
Well, to me, I have to tell you, I've kind of been in that circumstance. I've operated and owned businesses that were in dire straits, and so when you're forced to close a business or forced to deal with the city that's in the situation they are, to me, it's like I said in my opening little brief monologue. If I'm looking to say where can I cut corners, who's going to take a loss, to me, the very first obligation of an employer is to his employees. And if that's not his first focus, then I don't think that person's much of a person. I don't know how else to say that. But let me dive into a little bit of the facts. I understand that the city of Pontiac, and we'll try to focus on that primarily today because that's your experience as I understand it, but I understand that the pension for the city employees that are retired is funded in excess of 150%. Is that true?
For the city employees, you're correct. There's
Okay.
two separate systems now. The police and fire are under one, and the other city employees in a separate system. But
So-
for that system, you're correct. It's
Okay, so-
150% funded.
So the 150%, that's for city employees, but not for police and fire. Is that what you're telling me?
Right.
Okay, so how on a percentage level, so that I can do some math over here, what's the funding level of the police and fire pension?
Well, my latest information is right now is it's about 88% funded. I don't know if you're aware, but about 2 years ago, the city did away with the police department, contracted with the Oakland County Sheriff's Department, of which anyone who had 10 years or more with Pontiac Police could vest in the pension system, even though they now work for the Sheriff's Department. But they are still on the rolls there, and Mr. Schimmel, in his wisdom, has taken the position that they are no longer obligated to pay any money into the system, which is in litigation because, of course, the pension board's view is he is obligated to pay it. You know, these are still active people. So right now it's about 88% funded for the police and fire.
Okay, so what would be the percentage breakdown, Jim, for a dollar that goes into the pension? What portion would come from an employee and what portion would come from an employer?
Well, over the years, it's all been set on a 16% basis. Now, when I first hired on, it was 8 and 8% apiece, and through years of negotiation, it got negotiated back to 5% for the employees, then 3% for the employees, and then finally none for the employees.
And then the difference would come from the city.
Right.
Is that correct? And that's and the reason I went down that path is I wanted to get into my layman's looking through the window understanding of what took place in Pontiac. And in fact, there's two paths for listeners that I want to talk about. The first is the path on pension and health care benefits, but then the second part is what actually happened to Pontiac, because I think that a lot of folks listening, especially those in my corner on the conservative side, have a tendency of thinking, of comparing this to General Motors' bailout and all kinds of other things, and frankly, I just don't see it that way. So we'll get to what took place within the city of Pontiac that caused this financial implosion in a little bit. But you know, when I look at it, to me, it just, at least at this level, it's just math. If the way I understand it is that you folks, the police officers at least, accepted a lower wage than your peers within the community of policemen in Michigan, so that you could have a greater health care and pension package. Is that true?
That's true.
Well, tell me how that worked. As I understand it, and by the way, listeners, I reached out to the emergency medical or the emergency manager's office and did not get a response. I would have enjoyed having them be half this show. Just so
maybe
everyone
he'll
knows.
send you a written order.
Well, perhaps. Maybe
that's how he seems to work.
Maybe he'll glom on to part of my store's income or something. But
he might.
Yeah, but maybe if he did that, he'd just be trying to glom it so he can put it into the Medicaid explosion, which I'll get to in a little bit. But tell me how that negotiation, or the state of mind from the policeman's point of view in terms of that negotiation, because as I recall, you had some pushback from your fellow officers.
In later years, yes. Early on, that was kind of a mindset that was kind of instilled in me, and I would kind of pass that down as time went on. But there gets to be a point where common sense takes over, and you can only get so much out of a funded pension system. So it got to be a point where the only thing we needed to discuss in later years that I was there was wages. We had what the fire department had, we had what the police command had, and everybody was kind of, they were happy with what was coming down the line. So then it got to be wages, and the city always took the position that, wow, we'll just soon give you a pension and pay it in the future because we don't want to pay it now, i.e. wages.
And that's exactly the point I wanted to make, Jim, is that the way I understood what was taking place is they said, we don't want to pay you. For example, this radio station, we're sitting in Muskegon, so I'll use Norton Shores as an example. As I understood it back at the time, Pontiac didn't want to pay you wages that would be comparable to what the Norton Shores police officers were making, and the way they did that was to kick the can down the road, meaning health care and pension.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
That's exactly correct.
So now we're down the road, and you're saying, okay, pay me the wages that you've promised, and their answer is not so much. Is that right?
Their answer really is, we're not going to do it, period. It's not so much, we're just not going to do it. You need to understand, my pension check is paid for out of the pension system, so that has nothing to do with the city now at this point. But the benefits, of course, is, that's something that is picked up by the city. So it's kind of two separate parts to that story.
The city of Pontiac, I mentioned earlier, I wanted to talk about what took place. I think a lot of folks myself included, by the way, I think it's very easy to stand back on ideological rhetoric and look at a city on the other side of the state or somewhere else in America and say, okay, that city collapsed, they must have made some poor decisions. But I think the truth of it is, and what everyone, when I talked about my little opening monologue, that we're going to drive this back to how it will affect you, not you, but you, citizen Michigan, you, citizen America, is that cities across America are imploding. And if you look at the population in Pontiac of where it was 20 years ago versus where it is now, you have this big monolith government that was built to support a much larger contingent of citizens, and now the citizens have almost evaporated, and they didn't evaporate because there was poor choices. We could debate that another time. They evaporated because the jobs went away, but I don't know that I want to leave that at the doorstep of the police officers and firefighters and municipal workers that did their jobs. So with that being the foundation, tell me what you're viewing as the general attitude of what's this fellow's name, Louis Schimmel. Has he? Because when I've not met him, obviously, I read his bio. It's very impressive. Although I see he's been in some places where there was controversy left behind. But reading some of the quotes that I found in newspaper articles, this guy seems like he's an arrogant son of a gun.
Well, again, like you, I've never met him either, and it's just strictly based on what I read in the newspaper, probably the same articles you read. But to me, he comes off, one, as arrogant, and two, he's taking a bad situation, in my opinion, and making it's almost like it's vindictive. It's a vengeful thing. His comments to the employees about call 1-800-pension board if you're not happy. And someone asked him in an open meeting he had with the retirees, how do you sleep at night? He said, I sleep fine. Call your pension board members and see how they sleep. Well, the police and fire has over $200 million in their account. We just said the other one has $450 million in their account. Somebody must be doing something right down the road.
I see.
Or those accounts wouldn't be that solvent.
Yeah, I saw back in May that the current city council of the city of Pontiac, and I have to emphasize it that way, it's the current city council, not the council that a lot of folks would like to say, okay, those people made bad decisions, because that's not who these people necessarily are. But I saw back in May that they had a vote of their own body to say what we need to do is take these pension funds that are so well funded and pay from them the health care costs that you folks, the EM, are talking about stripping them out of. That was their vote to do that, and his answer was to say absolutely not. And in fact, I think the way I understood it, it went a step further in him suggesting that a portion of those monies that they would have liked to have earmarked to go towards paying health care, he wanted to take and put into the general fund for the state of Michigan. Did I read that right?
Close. You were right with it right up to the last part. He wants it would require a 420 transfer, which my understanding of that has to be set up through the IRS of that monies that he wanted to take out of the pension system, or that the city council did, and put into a fund to pay health care. And his idea was, well, that you don't have time to do that. So he wants, whatever his plan was that he wanted to do with that excess money, he wanted to take the balance of it and transfer that into the state MERS, Michigan Employee Republic, or Michigan Employees Retirement System. He wanted to transfer that money into there.
So I'm trying to add this up in my head, because regardless of what pot he wants to put it in, he's taking it out of a pot that was set up to pay the people that earn the wages that it belongs to.
Right.
So I'm going to take it from this person that earned it, by the way, and gift it to that person over there. Is that? I mean, I know if I'm saying it simply, but that's what it sounds like to me.
Gift it, I don't know. I guess in the sense of giving it to him, yes. I don't know what kind of shape the state employees system is in Michigan there. I don't know what shape the mirror system is in, but and it boils down, I think, again, to his adversarial position here, because it's like one of the employees at that meeting said, had you suggested this 2 years ago, maybe it was a viable idea. But in 2 years, just the untruths and the, probably again, the arrogance of this guy have just been, to a degree, nobody believes him anymore. Why would they think that's the right thing to do when he just goes off on his own, makes it, again, an adversarial, vengeful type environment, and nothing can get done that way.
Yes, I'm sure I'm looking at this too simplistically, but from the outside looking in, you've got a police department, the retirees of a police department that have certain things that have been promised in writing to them, and obviously that's not a healthy circumstance that's going on in Pontiac. So he's saying two things as I interpret it. A, it's not healthy, and therefore you're not going to get the health care benefits we promised you, and there appears to be some excess money we can take and give it to the mirror system. And to me, that I can't get those two things to add up in my head. It's just, to me, it's unethical.
Well,
it's
let
not
me throw you
morally
another
correct.
curveball.
But what I need
with the employees over 65 in the police and fire system that are Medicare eligible, he's now drafted an order that says their $400 stipend they're going to get to help offset their Medicare will be paid by the police and fire pension system. And, of course, the board members there are going, you can't do that. That's illegal. We can't raise their pension benefit after they've retired. We can't do that. And he issues an order and says, you will do it. Well, they're not going to. It's going to, again, end up in court. But here's the interesting point. They're not paying in, as I mentioned earlier, their obligations, which is in court, trying to make them do it. And if the police and fire system falls under 80% funded, he can take control of that, too.
Yeah.
He dissolves the pension board. They no longer have a say in anything, and he takes control of that money.
Okay,
now we're talking $241 million.
Hold that thought, Jim. We're going to go to a break, and we're going to pick up right there when we come back.
Alrighty.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Renegade River Show. My name is Mike Hewitt, and we are on with Jim Brown. Jim is a retired Pontiac police detective. He twice served as vice president and then president of the Pontiac Police Officers Association. And today we're talking about emergency managers' management style and what's going on with their pension and their health care, and inevitably what will probably happen to you if you can hear my voice. Welcome back, Jim.
Thank you, Mike.
Listen, when we left off, we were just starting to get into something that had me writing feverishly. Tell me about this 80% thing that the emergency manager is taking the city into. Let's dive into that a little bit deeper for me.
My knowledge of it is real limited, but the pension board said the other day that Schimmel issued a order for the pension board to pay the $400 stipend that they're going to offer for the employees who are 65 and over, the retired employees, 65 and over, the Medicaid employees. So the city wouldn't have to meet that obligation. And right now, the police and fire pension system stands at 88% funded. If that falls under 80%, then he can come in and dissolve that board and take control of that pension money.
Has anyone put a pen to it about how likely that would be to get it driven down? And I don't know how many employees we're talking about, times the $400 times monthly, etc. So,
well, and I'm not sure either. I know what the city's, what the Oakland Press said the numbers were. that there were 752 Medicare employees, but those all can't be out of the police and fire. And I can't imagine he thinks that the police and fire system is going to pay for general employees. But who knows what he thinks. And that's one part of the problem with this. The information coming from the city and the pension board is very limited. And I'm not sure the pension board knows because, there again, the city isn't doing it. I got a letter from the finance manager of the city saying I've got to make a decision on my health care by August 19th. I don't even have a packet yet, although they say it's in the mail. Who knows?
Tell me what's the relationship, Jim, between the board, the pension board, and city council? I don't necessarily understand the operational order of who does what.
Again, the pension boards are separate entities from the city.
Where do they come from? How do they get to be a pension board member?
One is by charter. There's a independent who's elected by the members. There's a police representative who's elected by the members. There's a fire representative who's elected by the fire members. And then by charter, the city finance manager is on it. And one other person, but I'm not, let's see, there's 2, 3. I think there's one more, and I'm not sure. And to be honest with you, I tried to look up the city charter today because I wanted to know when the pension board was established, and I can't find an original one online. I saw it in 1982 when they revised it, but I can't find the original one. So
okay, does the city seem to be inclined to try to find a way to pay for the things they've committed to as it pertains to retired employees?
Well, there again, Mike, I'm 2,000 miles away, and I don't really have a pulse on that. I think they are, just from what I read in the paper. I think the city council's sympathetic to it. But I don't think they really have any power to run their own city anymore. I don't think the mayor does. It sounds to me like whatever anybody wants to do, Louis Schimmel can just override it, write an order, and it's canceled.
Well, see, that was my interpretation, because city council voted to, as I mentioned earlier, city council voted to fund the health care from pension. Schimmel, the emergency manager, said no, and that was the end of it. It just can't happen.
Well, it's a VEBA account.
Yep, and I got to tell listeners, I want everyone to understand, I started out in favor of emergency managers as a mechanism, as I mentioned in my opening statement, as a mechanism to help manage, frankly, communities, to save us as a state from pouring state tax dollars generated by everybody into given rat holes. But I got to tell you very candidly, I don't trust Governor Snyder. I don't trust his emergency manager system. And the backdrop for this, and what's brought me to this topic, is watching the Medicaid explosion. Because frankly, I think inevitably what the governor's office would love to do is take our retired employees and push them into Medicaid. And it's, to me, I think it's more than a coincidence that this is the dialogue we're having, exactly why, while he's promoting, pushing, twisting, and pulling every political trick imaginable to ram Medicaid explosion, which is the foundation for Obamacare, down our throat. I don't know how else to say it, but all of these things are tied together, and for us not to think they are is foolhardy. So that's my view. What's the next step? Where do the city police officers and firefighters want to take this fight?
Oh, it's everything from both pension systems is ultimately going to end up in the courts.
What's on that note, let me interrupt my own thought for a minute, if I might. The Detroit police officers, or Detroit city workers in total, as I understand it, are litigating, but I also understand that the Attorney General, Bill Schuette of Michigan, has stepped in to say, wait a minute, you can't take Detroit's pension because our Constitution in Michigan says you can't. And the governor's office and the emergency manager are saying, oh yeah, we can. And so that's going to be litigated also. Now, have you followed that at all from out there?
Just one article that I got that someone sent me from the Detroit Free Press. That's all that I've read on that. That's so my understanding of that is very limited. Yeah, and again, it's trusting the Free Press, but I did see in there where the Attorney General did say that the pensions can't be diminished
Well, he quoted from the Michigan Constitution. Keeping in mind, we're talking about all Republicans, and Bill Schuette is a Republican, and of course Governor Snyder is supposedly a Republican, and so you've got a little bit of infighting on this topic. I've already told listeners in my opening statement I am definitely a Republican, albeit a constitutional Republican. I mean, it's almost fascinating that the EM thinks he can. When you read, even as a layman, when I read the state of Michigan Constitution, it's not ambiguous. It's blunt. You cannot, you shall not is the word it uses. You shall not. And to me, that's the end of the topic. But it seems like some ideologies, everything is always open to negotiation. There's nothing ever final where we can say, that's it, we've made a deal, whether we like it or not, we got to move on. It's always somebody that says, yeah, but. I have a problem with that kind of politics.
Well, as far as the Pontiac situation goes, and I guess even to a point, although I don't know anything about the emergency financial manager in Detroit, but certainly what I see in here from the one in Pontiac, it's back to that vengeful, vindictive, arrogant attitude that this guy just thinks he can do anything. I don't think he thinks the rules apply to him.
What I find fascinating about it is that when you have a city that's elected by the population of the city, we can get into the demographics like I mentioned earlier and say the city used to be X number of hundreds of people and now it's down to this. But nevertheless, the city council was still elected in a validated, legitimate election. And the emergency manager now has the power to say, I don't care. This is what you're doing.
Exactly.
I just find that just so contrary to the American system and how our government was supposed to. There's no checks and balances in that. We've turned the guy into a little warlord, and I can't get my head around the idea that there's a handful of people that think that's good management. It's not. I wouldn't run a company that way. I've already mentioned, and again in my opening statement, I wouldn't not pay people that have already earned wages to me. And yet there's a fair number of people that say, yeah, let's hose them. I can't in good conscience think that's great Republican Party politics. I don't think it's conscionable as an American. I just reject it out of hand.
And you brought that point up a couple times, Mike, about a Republican policy and so on. I don't view it the same way. I don't think that it's Republican and Democrat or liberal and conservative or any, what it boils down to is just right versus wrong. And what they're doing is just wrong. And again, like you said, the city council and the mayor have no say-so in it. None whatsoever. And through my years of being in Pontiac, I know that the city council and the mayor and others took pride of what they were doing and tried most of the time to do things that they thought were right. It wasn't just a haphazard run organization.
Well, what I find fascinating, Jim, and when I talk about it from an ideological point of view, I'm over here in Muskegon, Michigan, and what I think a lot of listeners may or maybe they do or don't, I don't know, but to me, if you had a referendum in Muskegon, just to use it as an example, if the voters of Muskegon decided to direct their government to do something, that ought to be what that government does, providing us within confines of the state constitution and the ordinances and the policies that are already set in place in Muskegon. But I'm wondering if listeners realize that emergency managers have the power to say, no, I don't care. Doesn't matter whether your council does it or even if you did it as a voter referendum, this is still what's going to happen. That's from a different country in a different time. That's what I'm saying.
Well, not anymore. It's this country and this time, because that's exactly what this man has done.
Okay, so what we're looking for, and the reason I'm really wanting to tie this up, is when we look forward and we think about things like the Medicaid explosion by Governor Snyder and his buddy, Mr. Obama, and you folks better start getting used to the term non-compliant. Understand that your sovereign control isn't there anymore. These are the things they're going to do, whether you like them or not. Just like Nancy Pelosi said, you wait till it's done, then we'll tell you what's in it. And that's kind of the same ideology that we're seeing unfold with this. This is what's going to happen. It doesn't matter what your opinion is. like I said earlier, if they were to draw and say we can't pay any forward X number of dollars, all right, fine. But when folks have already earned the wage that generated that, you just can't undo that. It's unimaginable to me.
Well, and I think another quick point here we need to hit too, Mike, is like I said, he did away with the police department, merged them with the sheriff's department. He's done away with the fire department, merged them with Waterford Township Fire Department. So those are wages and benefits they're no longer paying. My understanding, and again, is I don't want to go out on a limb here saying something that's not true, but I think he's done away with the Department of Public Works and privatized all that. I did see an article in the Oakland Press there where the cities went from 600 employees at one time down to less than 60 now. So he's done all this. See, all those obligations are, although the ones that can vest in the system are still there, all the other obligations are gone.
Yeah,
longevity pay, holiday pay, all those things are gone.
Yes, and I got to tell you candidly, I don't know whether I would have agreed with him or not on those decisions looking forward. I wouldn't know. But to say that he privatized some services, I probably would agree with that. And then to say that 600, but we can do it with 60, that'd be fine too. But you can't go back on your word to folks that have already earned the wage. That's the point that I'm bringing, and I'm pointing it out to listeners, regardless of where they're located, whether it's Muskegon or anywhere in Michigan that can hear my voice. Understand that this is a precedence for your future. It's not just Pontiac or Detroit or Benton Harbor or Flint or Saginaw. This is a precedence for an ideology that's looking to capsulate America, frankly.
Well, and that was my point in bringing that up, is he has done away with everything. Their obligations now are very, very limited. You know, we believe he has an obligation to fund the pension system that he's not, both of them, and he has an obligation to fund his VIVA system. But for employees of the police department, fire department, DPW, lawn services, park services, there's no more longevity, there's no more wages, there's no more holiday pay. He's done away with all that. Where did all this money go? If they were paying him a year ago, and they're not paying that money today, where did it go?
Is the city of Pontiac in bankruptcy?
No, receivership, according to his letter. And again, you know, I'm going by what his own orders say. So
I'm obviously a layman and not a lawyer, but I'm assuming that there's a difference between receivership, meaning it falls underneath his jurisdiction to make these decisions, whereas if there was a bankruptcy judge involved, the judge would take over these decisions and it would be more of a judicial matter. Is that your understanding?
I guess so. Like you, my knowledge is very limited on that, but I can see where that difference would make sense.
Well, to me, it's a huge difference. If part of the missing ingredient in this has been the lack of, in my mind at least, has been the lack of check and balance. If there were an outside entity, a judicial body, saying these are the things we have to do, I would feel a little bit better than a political arm saying, is there any money I can glom for the state mirror system? And by the way, Obamacare is coming, it's going to be okay. But Jim, hang with us, because we're going to go to a break and we'll be right back shortly.
Oh.
Well, welcome back. You're listening to the Renegade River Show, and my name is Mike Hewitt, and we're on today with Jim Brown, a retired police detective from Pontiac and formerly the vice president and president of the Pontiac Police Officers Association. Welcome back, Jim.
Well, thank you, Mike.
Hey, when we went to break that time, we were just starting to talk about the cost of all of this going forward, $400 and some other miscellaneous things. What is the cost in health care to the retired employees supposed or speculated to them?
Well, they sent out some quotes. Let's do just a two-person husband and wife. You know, retired, they probably don't have too many kids. It goes anywhere from a very deluxe policy with just a small deductible is $1,500 down to a Blue Cross policy with a $3,000 deductible down to about $1,000. And then there's one at $1,248 and one at $1,325, where the benefits vary in between there.
Right.
So it's quite a sum of money when you're on. I'm sure most of the people did like I did when I thought I was ready to retire. I went over and met with the pension board administrator, who does not work for the pension board, strictly separate entity from the pension board. She was very competent, very trustworthy, and I knew exactly when I walked out of her office what I would be making 20 years down the road. And, that's where you make your decision to retire. You're planning for your retirement, your wife's planning for her retirement, and when you're told you have these benefits, now all of a sudden they want anywhere from a chunk of $1,000 up to $1,493. Makes a big difference.
Yeah, you know what some listeners may have a problem understanding, Jim, and it is a political understanding, is that you take, for instance, me. I've spent most of my life in some form of entrepreneurial position, so whatever I have or don't have when I get old will be the result of what I saved or didn't save. And so there are some folks that are listening that are saying, hey, too bad for you. You didn't save, so you're hosed. But my retort to that, and the reason that I've decided to get involved in this a little bit more, is twofold. First off, you folks accepted, I think, again, like I said early on, some folks imagined that you guys had this big union contract and you were rolling in the dough and life was good and you just wiled it away and didn't take care of yourselves. When the reality of it is that the City of Pontiac police force worked for less than the average Michigan median wage of any job. And I'm thinking, so we have these guys wear a target on their back and work Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. We're going to pay them less than the average wage that Michigan in total is making, with the caveat being, we'll pay you the difference, but it's going to come in the form of a health care policy and pension. I think that was the police officers looking forward to their retirement years and putting away. They decided to take their wages at the end rather than up front. So to those folks that say they just didn't take care of themselves, I think that you guys did, but I think you thought that the citizens of Pontiac and the governor's office and Michigan in total would keep their word to you.
Absolutely. I've been retired 13 years now, and this is all of a sudden coming at me after, 13 years on a fixed income of what I was promised in December of 1999 when I went to meet with the pension board administrator. This is what they told me I would have. And I made a conscious decision then, I can live on that amount of money the rest of my days. Or I could have stayed longer. I had a choice, taken another promotion, stayed 3 or 4 more years if I wanted. But that was not, I made a conscious decision. I can live with that.
Jim, is it different for a person that, say a retired person stays in Pontiac and accepts whatever the stipends is that the EM is flipping out as some gracious act as if it's his money? Would the cost for continued health care be the same if I were a retired employee in Pontiac, staying in Pontiac, or if I moved to Florida, as an example?
Well, I understand that there's the cost may be somewhat less in Florida, just because I've seen a couple of guys that I used to work with have put that up on the Facebook page of the police department. But again, if he goes down somewhere in Florida, finds his own insurance that's cheaper, and takes that, he does not get the $400 stipend that Schimmel believes is going to change our whole life here. The only way you get that stipend of the $400 is to take the plan that the city has offered through Blue Cross.
So you get $400. Is that a credit towards the Blue Cross that the city is providing to you, almost like in the private world it'd be called COBRA? So I quit my job and they, by law, have to provide for me a mechanism to continue paying my own insurance. And so I think that's probably the law that this is resting on. But you're saying that the emergency manager kicked in an extra $400 to go towards that purchase of insurance. That's what you're saying?
If you purchase through the Blue Cross Guide Path plan that the city is offering.
Well, I'm wondering, I'm trying to get my head around the idea of why the $400 from the emergency manager, who put it as if he was paying it himself, by the way, but I'm trying to get my head around the idea that that $400 has a different value if you buy their insurance versus you buying insurance somewhere else, because it sounds a little bit like a car dealer rebate or an insurance promotional scheme, or win a trip to Acapulco if you buy our insurance. It sounds a little bit like I don't want to say scam, but scam.
Looking at it on the surface, I got to agree with you. I see, a couple of his articles, he was all upset the General Pensions Fund sent a couple of their members to Hawaii. I have no idea why, and I'm sure they paid for it. Maybe he getting a trip to Hawaii. He was all upset with them getting one. I don't know. But that's the way it is, though, is if you don't take what the city's offering through Blue Cross, you don't get the $400.
So is there a kickback from Blue Cross? I don't know how else to ask that, because that's what it smells like from out here.
I don't know, and again, I've been out of this so long that I'm sure my contacts at Blue Cross have all moved on too, and I probably could never find out.
Well, the reason I'm asking is my own personal ideology is I'm a capitalist. I like privatization of everything. But when I hear a government entity, or frankly any entity, say that we're only going to give you this dough, let me equate it to Renegade River, my gun shop. If you brought in a gun and said, I'm thinking about trading this in, and I offered you $400 for it, I don't say I'll give you $400 as a trade-in, or only $350 if you just sell it to me. To me, the thing's either worth $400 or it's not.
Exactly.
And anything else is a come on. That's just, maybe I'm simple, but I think a number's a number, and it shouldn't. The only time it's going to fluctuate is if somebody's getting something out of it. That's how I'm seeing this.
It would seem that way.
Yeah, no, I'm not necessarily suggesting that the EM is getting something out of it, but I'd have to speculate that somebody is. Now, it could be as simple as Blue Cross is offering them a reduced rate, but then I would ask, why aren't we giving Aetna and Provident Life and all of these other insurance companies an opportunity to bid on this? And let's see if we can't drive the cost down for everyone that's being forced to pay in. That, to me, sounds like good stewardship, not just saying, we'll give you a little bit if you do what we want, and we won't if you don't.
That's pretty much what it is.
The goal would be to drive the cost down for everybody if I were the emergency manager. And anything else, to me, smells. I don't know how else to put that. That's what I see. So
I kind of tend to agree with you there.
Okay, well.
And just a side note, those rates I told you were about 10 days old.
Right.
It's my understanding they've actually climbed a little bit since these came out.
Well, we're down to
not much, just a little bit.
Well, but we're down to just a little under 3 minutes, and one of the things that I wanted to touch on as we go forward is that when we're talking about these rates, $400 or $1,100 for $1,500 for a family, whatever the number is today, to replace health care for what the police officers and firefighters are getting screwed out of, whatever that number is, every media source I can find from NBC to Fox News and everybody in between is saying that over the next 18 months to 24 months, we're going to see 66 to several 100% increases in health care. So even these ugly, ugly numbers right now are only going to go up dramatically once we get into free health care.
Yeah, exactly. And I spoke with a couple of representatives because I checked on the internet. Of course, my phone started ringing off the hook. I had one gentleman who was honest enough with me to tell me theirs are going to go up 60% January 1st, and there are others expected to go up upwards of 150%.
Right.
He's the only one honest enough to tell me that.
And so for the listeners listening that aren't involved in some pension with a city somewhere, or not working for a county or waiting for your pension board to screw you, understand that we're all in this boat. We really are. So with you pushing back on me, I'm okay with that, but understand truly, truly, we are all in this boat. Now, which one's going to get hosed first? We know it's going to be the police. Jim, any final comments before we run out of time? We're down to 60 seconds.
Yeah, just quickly, Mike, I appreciate this forum to vent a little bit, and I just want to say that the policemen and firemen, firewomen, police officers, ladies and gentlemen, were some of the finest people I ever had the privilege to serve with in the city of Pontiac. And for them to be treated like this by a city who saw this coming down the line is just purely wrong. And you're right in the thing. If they don't think it can happen to them, it will. I've seen a couple of posts on your website about a guy who said, boy, I'm glad I worked for the UAW. Hang on. It can happen to the UAW too. So, you know, these are men and women who went out and gave 110% to that city every day.
No question about it. Jim, listen, thank you very much for being on the show, and more importantly, thank you for what you did in your career.
Well,
ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you next Sunday at noon. Have a great week.